All right, let's look at habitat destruction. This is certainly not going to be just South Africa based or even Africa based, although because habitat destruction is worldwide. But primarily the prominent habitat destruction has occurred in forests. Roughly 50% of the world's forests have been destroyed in the past 3 centuries, so 300 years. 25 nations have lost almost all their forest. Another 29, more than 90% of their forest. Tropical forests are disappearing up to 130,000 kilometers squared a year, which is 50 football fields a minute. And that's how much tropical forest is being cut. That is scary, since that's the highest biodiversity, as we learned earlier. It's considered the most important driver in species extinction. We talked about how many species go extinct every 20 minutes. It's primarily due to tropical rainforest destruction. Agriculture is the biggest cause of habitat destruction. Other human activities include mining, clear-cut logging, trawling, urban sprawl, many ways that we can, livestock, that we can really degrade the habitat. And in the last 300 years, as our population has gone, which we saw earlier, the global extent of cropland has risen sharply from 2.7 million kilometers squared to 15 million kilometers squared, mostly at the extent of forest habitats. More land was converted from cropland from 1950 to 1980 than 1700 to 1850. So our population grows, we've got to eat, and so we clear land. This is a figure that shows the extent of conversion to agriculture. You can see in Africa itself, it's mainly southern Africa. A lot of the tropical forest area has not been, but it's beginning to here. But a lot in East Africa, down into southern Africa, Western South America, obviously the Eastern North America, and then almost all of Europe, where we've been for a long period of time. Look at India. There's no land left. I don't know where those poor tigers live. And then China has been developed extensively as well. Developing countries, deforestation is generally caused by the rapid human population growth. But it's beginning to change. And more recently, the people have spread out enough, and really you don't see a great immigration of people from the cities going to the rural areas to graze farms. What you see is people coming from the farms to the urban areas. But their habitat destruction is still going on. Well, what's causing it? It's large-scale agriculture, and it's mainly 2 big crops, soybeans and cattle. Crops, livestock, tree plantations, all by corporations, palm oil plantations in Southeast Asia, surging demand for grains, not only to feed cattle, not only to feed people. We all think biodiesel is a great idea. Brazil is 100% fossil fuel independent, but the amount of land that they have to continue to clear to grow soybeans to make biodiesel is staggering. Cattle in Brazil have tripled from 22 million to 74 million head in just the 1990s. And industrial soy farming, and if you click on that link, has also grown dramatically. Now, if you look at deforestation drivers in Latin America, this was 2008 data. So this is Central America. It's still primarily subsistence agriculture, but the greatest percentage is ranching, cattle. And here we look at drivers of deforestation, large-scale agriculture. So this is in South America. This is all soybeans, some corn, and cattle. So if you look at tropical rainforest destruction, just in the last 3 decades, gone from about 16 million kilometers square to 9 million kilometers square today. Southeast Asian forests are disappearing the most. African and New World tropics have somewhat lower rates of percent annual loss. The general trends, though, hide some important areas being lost. For example, the Caribbean, the Mesoamerican, and the Andean regions are all suffering, like the cloud forest, are really suffering severe rainforest loss. It's kind of buffered because the Amazon is so huge that the percentage looks less, but if you look at the percentage of cloud forest, it's really being declined much faster, excuse me. Tropical Africa is the same way. It's severe in West Africa, montane areas of East Africa, Madagascar, but there's still substantial forest in the Congo Basin. And those areas are really protected by diseases. It's too dangerous to go in there for us. So if you look at gross forest loss in tropical country, you can see that Brazil has the largest amount of hectares, thousands of hectares, 3.292 thousand millions of hectares lost from 2000 to 2005. That's not a long period of time. Indonesia, only 701. You say, and I did that on purpose, only 701, but that's a much larger percentage of that country. Brazil's huge. Indonesia is not. So Indonesia is actually losing a larger percentage. Argentina, Paraguay, Malaysia, India, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mozambique, Tanzania, Mexico, Colombia, Thailand, Zambia, Bolivia. This is the annual change in forest cover. Excuse me, I have to kind of stare at my screen here. And this is from 1990 to 2000. The country that has lost the most is Burundi. I'm sure all of you know exactly where Burundi is. I'm going to show you here in a minute. Togo, Honduras, Philippines, Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, Uganda, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, El Salvador. You can see it's just a mixture of several of your tropical countries, but spread all throughout the world, not just in one central area. Here's Burundi. I had to show you. I had to look it up. It's just south of Rwanda, just west of Tanzania and Kenya. And they have lost, the percent annual change in forest loss is 4.65% per year. Annual change is 91%. It's scary how much forest is being lost in some of these countries. And take a look at some of those, that table. I don't want to go over it in depth here, but and then you look at total change in forest cover. So they're using remote sensing, and they use remote sensing and they go around and from satellite images, they measure the photosynthetic color, and you can actually tell whether it's trees, shrubs, desert, etc. Pretty neat stuff. It's remote sensing, what Dr. Miller was talking about in his introduction. And we're bringing in a remote sensing specialist to Poly here next year, and I'm pretty excited about that. But they are actually able to determine where forests are being lost the most based on different satellite images from different years. Burundi, Togo, again, you have the same list, but look over here. You can see that Gambia, India, and Vietnam especially have increases in forest cover. So a 20% change in forest increase. However, if you go down and look at percent tropical forest loss for Vietnam, 1990 to 2005, it's 77.9%. The forest is increasing since 1990, but it's secondary. It's colonial plantations. It's palm oil. It's coniferous trees that are going to be used for lumber. It's not the original trees that the animals in that country evolved with. So they're still losing those systems. The oceanic island is where really the biggest destruction is, and the animals and the species, flora that live there are the most vulnerable. Most of the original forests have been lost in Japan, been lost in New Zealand. It's been Madagascar. That's going to be your online assignment. Philippines, Java, Borneo, Sumatra, New Guinea. They still have some original habitat, but they're losing it at remarkable rates. Look at that, 5 million hectares between 2000 and 2010. In Borneo, 12%, 24% in Sumatra, Malaysia, 6-8%. New Guinea is 2.4%, Indonesia. Very scary. A lot of really cool wildlife, birds, amphibians, reptiles in these areas. This is Sumatra, and it just shows you the remote sensing data. And you can just see how it's becoming non-primary, which means the tropical forest is just disappearing by 2010. Palm oil plantations are huge. Again, it's because of our energy crisis. We all need to drive cars and create things. And palm oil has really taken off in Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Ghana, Guinea. Not so much in Brazil. They're beginning to work with palm oil plantations and not just having, and we'll discuss this later, not just having these, you can do agriculture without just having a monoculture, and that's been successful in some areas and not in others. Tropical dry forest, I don't even know if you know what a tropical dry forest is. It's a forest that has a dry season. It's not wet all year long. The Central America had quite a bit of tropical dry forest, and only 1% of it is left. And one of the reasons why is that's the easiest place for people to live. And a lot of it was disease avoidance, malaria, because there's a dry season. People can get in there, they can cut the trees down, they can grow crops, and very severe in Madagascar as well, and parts of Southeast Asia. Mangrove forest, I think most of you have probably heard about those. Those are forests. The trees will actually grow out in the ocean, in the salt-tolerant ecosystem. Extensive roots, great, huge forest. More than a third of all mangroves have been lost in the last few decades of the 20th century, particularly in Southeast Asia. And that's a really important habitat for a lot of fish species and shellfish species that we depend on for food. A lot of animals use that, a lot of fishes, a lot of shellfish, invertebrates use that as their nursery. And when that habitat's gone, they don't have anywhere to lay eggs, and you start losing that species. And they were extremely important they cleanse the water, and they were also important for protection. It's impossible to quantify, but there's been a couple papers that have been done that all the people lost during that last tsunami in Indonesia, Thailand, many experts believe that had the mangrove forest been there, they wouldn't have been near the destruction and loss of life, up to 50%. So it's a problem. 70% of the mangroves have declined in Indonesia, and you can see that they're being replaced by things like rice paddies. There still are some forests left, but they're so important for so many marine species, and the cleansing of the water. Coastal zones, mangroves included, coral reefs are always pretty much the most impacted, and that's because we humans want to live along the coast. And there are considerable losses in both the terrestrial habitats along the coast and the coral reefs in the water. Coastal zones in Asia, Northern South America, Caribbean, Europe, Eastern North America have all suffered severe habitat losses. In our country, it's saltwater marshes, extremely important, very much like the mangroves. They cleanse the water, nursery for a lot of important marine species, and they've literally been filled in. Waikiki Beach was a saltwater marsh, and they drained it and they brought in the sand. It's not a beach. It was a marsh, but you can't lay out in the sun in the marsh. Too many mosquitoes. This shows you where the people live. And these are these biodiversity hotspots that we were talking about earlier, and how they're impacted by the population density of 300 per kilometer squared, or 0 to 1. You don't have many hotspots in the middle of Australia, you don't have many people. And so people and hotspots go right together. There's too many people. Mediterranean forest and broadleaf forest, we think of, we hear so much about tropical rainforest destruction, and it's true. And I don't want to belittle that at all. But our Mediterranean woodlands and our temperate deciduous forest, or temperate broadleaf forest, have suffered more destruction than the tropical. And that's because of the long history of human settlement in those areas. We're talking about areas like Europe and Eastern North America. By 1990, 2/3 of the Mediterranean forest have been converted to agriculture. If you don't know what a Mediterranean forest is, it's an area that has good summer rain. It has rain during the hot period, not as much as a tropical. In the eastern U.S., Europe, old growth, broadleaf forest, oaks, greater than 100 years they're just almost gone. Coniferous forest, pine trees, have been less severely reduced. Only about a fifth have been lost by 1990. However, with increased demand and pulp production, that's going to change. Fortunately, the boreal forest all across northern Canada and then into Russia is in an area that's still fairly inaccessible, although they are finding their way into that. This is the fraction of potential area that has been converted by humans. And I apologize because I'm going to have to quit looking at the camera here, but Mediterranean forest, woodlands, and scrubs, you can see at this time, and temperate forest are the two habitats that have lost the most. So we've lost 70% of those habitats right now as we speak. Temperate broadleaf and mixed forest. Now here you get into the tropical forest, but this is a prediction. This is projected loss from now until 2050. So you can see tropical forest is about 55%, not 70%. Now, I'm not saying that this, I'm not trying to belittle it, but this is scary stuff. Flooded grasslands in South Africa, they're going to call those vleis, V-L-E-I. Very important for some of the species, servals, lechways, some of the antelope species that we discussed. They're being drained so they can grow crops or run livestock on them. Tropical and subtropical grasslands and savannas. Tropical grasslands have been could be lost up to 70%. Subtropical or tropical coniferous forests, there's a lot of those in Southeast Asia. Deserts, not near as much. Montane grasslands. You can see here that the boreal forest, if you really want to know the lungs of the world, the area that's producing oxygen for us, it's the boreal forest up in Canada and through the steppes region of Russia. Grasslands and deserts have suffered a much lesser extent, 10 to 20% of grasslands, which includes African savannas, which we're going to spend a lot of time in, the Llano and Cerrado in South America. Huge grasslands have been converted for cattle. The steppes of Central Asia, prairies of North America, Spinifex grasslands in Australia. A third of the world's deserts. The other 2/3 is probably well protected because there's not enough water there. But this hides some area. For example, in our own North American tallgrass prairie, there's only 3% of it left. This was the home to 60 million bison. It's gone. It's now a cornfield in Iowa and Illinois. And you know, if you read Lewis and Clark and their journals, and as they moved west, and the number of animals, the number of elk and grizzly bears and bison they saw in these areas that today are cornfields, it's saddening. It makes you sad. And large expanses are still being overgrazed by livestock or being produced for livestock. In South America, more than half the Cerrado is being used for soil fields. This is where the Llano is, which is up in Colombia, Guinea Highlands, Venezuela, and then the Cerrado is down here in Brazil. That's a Maine wolf that's from the Cerrado. Very important grasslands for a lot of species, and they're being lost. Boreal forest, again, it's only about 5 to 10% has been impacted. Nearly 30% of the Earth's carbon is stored there. However, in Russia, legal and illegal logging has grown rapidly. Siberia is now a major source of timber exports to China. China's got a good economy now, they're buying. Canada, nearly half the boreal forest is under tenure for wood production. Fire incidents are higher as global warming continues, with about 100,000 kilometers squared of boreal forest burning each year. Now, some of that's natural, part of the system, but some of it's being caused due to global warming and increase. And these are just some, this is the area of the taiga, and it's called the taiga in Europe and the boreal forest in North America. You should know it as both. Being college students, you're no longer allowed to be just smarter than a fifth grader. But these two areas just show large expanses of forest and very important to our whole. And then we get to the marine habitat destruction, which is just beyond scary, and especially the over exploitation, which you've been exposed to. And that shows you the amount of impact, and you can see that along our coast, and one of the worst is us, U.S. We are one of the worst at destroying coastal ecosystems. We like it. We like our beaches, and we need to work on educating people on how important some of these areas, like saltwater marshes, are. So habitat destruction and overpopulation are linked like this, and it's still going to continue. As the population grows, we're going to have to feed people, and it's going to continue, and it's unfortunate. So hopefully we'll continue with education and things will at least slow down. I don't see any way to bring things back.